This time on Ask Rad Rat, we're talking about if skating switch comes naturally if you get good enough. Let's do it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel about skateboarding and skateboarding video games and skateboarding stories and features and all kinds of other stuff. Today I'm answering your skateboarding questions. I've got a few. First is from Kvoth Grindkiller, who says, I noticed some of your backlog. I was watching some of your backlog when I noticed the Wise Man's Fear on your bookshelf. Not skating related, but what are your favorite authors and novels? Yeah, if you go back to my super old videos, I'm standing in front of a bookshelf. I don't have a lot of those books anymore. I used to collect signed hardcovers for stuff that I liked. I'll typically read on a Kindle, and if I love the book, I'll buy a hardcover. I don't collect paperbacks. Because I read on a Kindle. So if I'm going to buy it, I want to buy like a collector version, you know? Anyway, I had quite a few signed books and I sold most of them to finance buying this house, but it wasn't that much money. I mean, it didn't help that much. It just less stuff to move was probably more what the real answer was. There is a review I did not too long ago where I am in front of my new bookshelf. But anyway, I did compile a list for you. First is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. That is head, neck, shoulders, and chest above everything else. That series is incredible. They're making a series about it, which I really hope is good. I'm scared. There are 15 books in the series. So that show could go on for a long, long time if they decide to pace themselves and use everything up. They actually did a TV show about it. So somebody owned the rights, and it was like you have to use them within a certain amount of time or they expire. So they made a TV show that came on at 4 a.m, and it was terrible. And it wasn't designed to be good. It was designed to be like the legal minimum for using the license. But yeah, I'm hoping the new series is good. So it's a swords and magic type of book, okay, but it's really, really, really well done. It's incredible. Next series that I put on my list is the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This one is really cool, again with like magic, but more modern. Now, later in the series they have like guns and stuff, but I think that's past this original trilogy. It's a cool series with a unique system of magic. For me, I think hard fantasy is what you call the stuff I like. It's when things have actual rules and guidelines. It's not like, well, that guy's a wizard, so he does whatever the scene needs him to do. No, like here's how magic works exactly. And if they come up with a cool way to combine these things, then that's great. But it has to make sense. And like, so both of these series have really hard rules for how it all works. It's much more satisfying than the magician holds out his staff and then whatever. That's why I hate Harry Potter. Next, I have Quicksilver and basically anything by Neal Stephenson. I would say Neal Stephenson's probably my favorite author. Most of his books I really love. Some of them are sci-fi. Again, super hard sci-fi, where every detail is perfectly accurate and, did all the math to figure out exactly how things would work out. There's a book he wrote about how the moon explodes and what would happen. And so it would take a certain amount of time for the debris to reach the Earth. As it burns up in the atmosphere, it would make the Earth uninhabitable for 5,000 years or whatever. But it's all heavily researched. I like books where if you read them, you feel like you actually learned something, where it's not like, I was reading an old Batman comic and a guy gets shot. And so they look at the bullet and it spins counterclockwise instead of clockwise. And like, there's only one gun that does that. It's the Luger 516. And like, that's probably not true. Like I didn't learn a real fact. They just came up with that for convenience. But in these books, it's like everything is super legit. So the book I mentioned was called Quicksilver. This is not sci-fi at all. It's a historical fiction book. So it takes place in the 1600s. And like all kinds of stuff happens with like the plague and it's hard to explain what it is because there's just a lot of stuff happens. There's a country in there that doesn't actually exist that they've added in. And like, it's really interesting because there's actual historical figures show up and you can learn about them. Like I was saying, it's all really well researched and realistic. So what was the guy doing in England in 1649? Well, in the book, if it happens, it's probably realistic. And I like that about that. Totally different take is the Thrawn Star Wars books. There are, I think, 5 now, maybe 6. There was an old one. Was it a trilogy or a duology? I don't know, but there were old Star Wars books with Thrawn in them. Then there's a new series right now that's also really good. It's by the same author. So like when Disney bought Star Wars, they reset all the stuff so the books didn't count anymore. So these are new books, but it's the same character. But they're all good. I like all that stuff. There's probably a lot more. That's the stuff that I have on my shelf right now because I've only rebought some of it. But those were the big hitters. That's the stuff that I had to have. Okay, next question is from Mike. It says, thank you for the hard work you put into your content. You're welcome. Do you think any current skate brands will still be around 100 years from now? He's got 2 questions. I'll try not to forget he has a second one. I don't think so. Like the oldest brands right now are Powell Peralta, Santa Cruz. There might be a few other ones that still exist, but I don't think they have that much cachet in the name. Like Powell, you get some respect for Powell, but like it's not a huge brand like it used to be. I don't think skaters have as much it's not even nostalgia, but like a hot new brand with your favorite skater on it is more likely to convince you to buy a board than the fact that it says founded in 1978 on it, So I just don't feel like that's likely. I think it's more likely that, let's say Powell, just for the sake of argument, if their business gets worse and worse and worse, that they would probably rebrand. They would try to be the hot new brand to bring in people, and they would ditch the name Powell at some point. If that's how things go, I could see that being a strategy rather than trying to brag about how old they are. So tough to say. I kind of feel like no. If you look at the history of brands, of like deck brands especially, is what I'm thinking of, they tend to come and go pretty quickly. So yeah, I doubt it. I'm probably not going to find out. But all right, next question. Do you think there will ever be an American professional skateboard organization like the MLB, NFL, and NBA? Absolutely not. Because like skateboarding is such an individual thing, and what it means to be pro and what it means to compete and stuff is totally different. Like if there's a standard pro circuit that you go on that links up to like you win the nationals and then you go to the Olympics or something like that, maybe, but I see that being a really small part of skateboarding. I don't really see that being a thing. The only thing I could think of is like a pro skater group, like a labor union, like a skater union that tries to get everyone health care and like work with the sponsors and the brands to like standardize deals and stuff like that. I could see that happening, but I don't really consider that the same thing. I think that might happen, but yeah, I don't think there'll be a skateboarding NBA. Next question is from Andrew, who says, I was wondering about your thoughts about the gaminess of Skate's scoring system. I love the series, but I always felt it was weird how the series was closer to a sim-like title, but always had challenges where it's more in your favor to spin your tricks like a maniac and hit a 360 hard flip onto a rail. So if you don't know what he's talking about, if you ever have to do a high score in like a contest or something in the Skate series, you can do a 360 hard flip, like a 720 Gazelle hard flip. Ideally do it off the nose, either fakie or nollie, and land in like a blunt or a nose blunt on a rail. Do the same thing out, and you will win every single time. And it's hard to come up with a way where they could make that not the case. They did a decent job of disincentivizing crazy combos. So in the Tony Hawk series, the more tricks you do in a combo, the higher your score is going to be. In Skate, that's not really true. If you can either do a really long blunt slide or like a kickflip 5-0, kickflip 5-0, kickflip 5-0, kickflip 5-0, kickflip 5-0 and land that, the long blunt slide is going to be worth more. So like doing things at speed is a lot more important. Adding in more tricks, flipping out and then flipping again and land manual and flip again. That stuff doesn't really give you points in Skate. So they did a good job in that sense. The only game I could think of that was better is Amped 2, which I'm pretty sure I reviewed on the channel. If so, there'll be a link right there. But that's a snowboarding game from the Xbox from about 2002 or something like that. And in that game, you would get points based on how stylish your tricks were. So if there was a big jump, you could either wind up and spin as fast as you could and do like a 1440 and land it, then that's going to be worth a few points. That's like nothing. No one cares. But if you do a much smaller spin, like a 540 or a 720, but you're doing a grab, you don't let go until the very last second, it's slow and even, where you don't kind of like do it and then stop and then float all the way down, where it's like you have it all the way balanced the whole way, maybe gets off axis for a little bit and comes around, and then you land right as you're done spinning. You're not about to land sideways and then twist and land it anyway, you know? And it was a lot of fun because you actually have to plan your stuff out. You don't just fling your character off of the ramp and hope that you land. You actually like, you know, plan out your trick and do it as well as you can. And that's a lot more fun. But I don't know how you could translate into skateboarding. Unless it was like a vert only game, you know, where it was all airs and how much air you get and how much you tweak the grab and that kind of stuff is how it's scored. But with street skating, I'm not really sure how you could do it better than skate. But if you have ideas, put them in the description and maybe the Skate 4 people will read it. I don't know. The last question is from Felix Musselman, who says, do you think skating switch comes natural when you get better at skating normal stance, or do you actually need to practice skating switch in particular? I come to wonder about that because I've never seen a pro skater that was really bad at skating switch. So I was wondering if you could be really good at skating, but suck at skating switch. I think the way that it works, I don't skate a lot of switch either, okay, for the record. But I do think that learning switch tricks is just so much easier than learning them normal because you already know how to do the trick. You know, if like no one took as long learning a switch flip as they did a normal one, unless they tried it immediately after learning. But you know how it works. You know how it feels to be in the air above the board. You know how your weight needs to be centered. You understand the angle of where your feet are to make it easier. You know all that stuff. So when you're learning kick flips and 360 flips and all this kind of stuff, it's a lot easier to learn them switch. So if you're super good, switch can not necessarily come naturally, but it'll feel like you're really talented compared to when you learned it in your normal stance. I've only had a few experiences with that, like I said, but like I did a switch frontside 5-0, I think the first time I ever tried one, because I understood how it worked. I wasn't scared of it. I've done lots of normal 5-0s. I've done every grind I could think of on this box already. I'm comfortable being on it. I know how it feels. So I've done a fakie nose grind on it. So coming up to it and popping switch is harder, but once I get into the grind, it feels fine. So you do build up these blocks, like the building blocks of skating. You understand how things should feel and all that. It just becomes easier to learn switch. So I was trying to think of a skater that doesn't skate switch at all, and the name Rodney Mullen came to mind, which I'm not entirely sure about anyway. So he's a bad example because he's probably the most talented skateboarder to ever live. But in the 80s, when he was the biggest freestyle pro on earth, he won every contest he entered except for one, which he got second in. I never saw him do a switch trick at all. I have a theory that he did because I found an old trick tip in Thrasher. I'll see if I can dig up the screenshot. I hope so. But he said, like, to practice this, try it in opposite foot, I think is the phrase that it used, which I'm assuming means switch. But again, I never saw him skate switch until the 90s. And then suddenly switch becomes cool in like the old Plan B videos, 92, 93, 94. And he's doing all this crazy switch stuff. It's like he just learned it like that, you know, because there's no evidence of him ever doing anything switch. And he has a whole part where he doesn't do anything switch for the most part. And then suddenly he's a switch god, you know, like it's kind of crazy. But I do think there is something to that. It's a lot easier to learn it if you got the balance, you got those building blocks, you know how things work. So yeah, I think it's totally possible to focus only on your normal stance and not be able to do anything switch. But it's unlikely, because if you want to do like a nose slide and do anything out of it, that's kind of like a switch trick, right? You do a crooked grind and you want to do a shove it out. That's like a nollie shove it, which is pretty similar to a switch shove it. So you're going to build up a little bit, but I think if you did only normal, you could be really bad at switch. But yeah. So that's my thought on that. If you have your own questions, go to radratvideo.com and submit them there. I'm running a little bit low, so don't hesitate to send me some. And that's it for now. Make sure you subscribe to catch stuff like this in the future. I've got video game series that I'm working on. I've got all kinds of reviews and things like that. So subscribe if any of that sounds good to you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.